All right, everybody. Looks like we're live, so we'll make a start. Thank you all for coming. Members of the public are advised that the meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the live stream recording will be made publicly available on YouTube and Council's website. I'll start with an acknowledgement of country. Nillumbik Shire Council respectfully acknowledges the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners of the country on which Nillumbik is located, and we value the significance of the Wurundjeri people's history as an essential to the unique character of the Shire. We pay tribute to all First Nations people living in Nillumbik, give respect to elders past, present and future, and extend that respect to all First Nations people. We respect the enduring strength of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and acknowledge the ongoing impacts of past trauma and injustices from European invasion, massacres and genocide committed against First Nations people. We acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people hold a deep and ongoing connection to this place. We value the distinctive place of our First Nations people in both Nillumbik and Australia's identity, from their cultural heritage and care of the land and waterways to their ongoing contributions in many fields, including academia, agriculture, art, economics, law, sport, and politics. We have one apology from Councillor Payne. I'll just look for a mover for the apology.
I can move that for you. That Councillor Jeff Payne's apology be noted.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Perkins. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Disclosure of conflicts of interest. Any conflicts of interest to disclose, councillors? All right. We'll move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. So I'll look for a motion.
Thank you.
Councillor Eyre.
Thank you. That the committee, acting under delegation from Council, confirms the minutes of the Planning and Consultation Committee meeting held on Tuesday the 13th of September 2022, which is in attachment 1.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Stockman. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Which brings us to the officers' reports. The first one is on the Diamond Creek Community Infrastructure Strategic Plan exhibition feedback. We have 2 speakers present tonight. The first is Daryl Morrow on behalf of Diamond Creek Omni, Older Men, New Ideas. So Daryl, if you're here, I'll ask you to come up. If you'd just like to make your way up to that table at the front. And just on your microphone, there are 2 buttons down at the bottom, and it's the right-hand button to turn the microphone on. And whenever you're ready, you've got 3 minutes.
Okay, that okay? I start now? Well, I represent Omni at Diamond Creek, but also Omni throughout the Shire of Nillumbik. We have one in Eltham, Diamond Creek, Hurstbridge and Panton Hill, and we're in the process of perhaps starting another one at Research as well. My colleague Ken Rampling was going to come and assist me tonight, but he's rang and said that he's taken ill, so I'm sorry about that. Ken Rampling started Omni in the Nillumbik Shire back about 14 years ago, and he's tracked all of the development and establishments of all these Omni groups throughout the Shire, and it's sad that he can't be here tonight. I've got message and personal response to Nillumbik councillors. Further to our written response to Diamond Creek proposed infrastructure strategic plan, which I hope you all have a copy and have had a chance to read that for tonight's meeting. We wish to reinforce the importance of Omni has in keeping with health and well-being within the Shire of Nillumbik. We are supported by COTA, which is COTA Victoria, which is Council on the Ageing, which forms legal advice to politicians for ageing Victorians, and by the positive ageing movement within the Shire of Nillumbik. We're supported by them as well. We have 4 strong groups now in the Shire of Nillumbik supporting all men aged from 50 years and beyond. we're proposing to start another one in research as well shortly. We wish to stay in our current premises, Senior Citizens Centre, 32 to 34 Elizabeth Street, Diamond Creek, which already houses much of the elderly citizens' needs. The premises are already owned and managed by Nillumbik Council to the best of my knowledge. This building is fit for purpose for us, that is, and other older people, and provides all the facilities that we need. It's needed for the ageing, that is, level entries from the street into the building, no steps, floorings level, toilets, we've got male and female toilets, first aid facilities, a room set up there with a defibrillator and other health needs. We have an excellent kitchen, plus we also have heating, adequate heating. First class parking, no roads to cross, we can walk to the train, and is user friendly for people with disabilities. That's about all I can say.
Perfect timing. That was exactly 3 minutes.
Is it? I didn't time myself. Thank you. Any
well
questions?
done.
Any questions?
Unfortunately, we can't do questions because you're speaking on behalf of Omni, but thank you for presenting to Council.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Guy Palmer on behalf of Nillumbik U3A. So Guy, your microphone is already on, so whenever you're ready, you can start speaking, and you've got 3 minutes.
Okay, thanks so much. So Nillumbik U3A welcomed the draft plan, and particularly its commitment to multi-purpose spaces. We are a growing organisation who's been in Diamond Creek for the last 10 years. We have classes at both the Senior Citizens Centre and the Living and Learning building. As we grow, we would like to do more and more classes in Diamond Creek. We do fewer classes than we should be doing, and that's partly a venue-related issue. And we certainly have a commitment to having a long-term presence in Diamond Creek. We use about 20 different venues around the Shire, so we've learnt a bit about good venues and bad venues, and I wanted to make a couple of points about that. The first is that rooms are about much more than just a physical space. Rooms have an ambience, they have a level of comfort and homeliness or otherwise, and bigger is not always better. And what we have discovered is that rooms that are the right size and feel cosy are the rooms that older people feel most comfortable in and that our classes are best in. They also need facilities, and those facilities are miles more appropriate if they're actually built in properly, which they currently aren't at Senior Citizens Centre, for example. And we're talking audio-visual and Wi-Fi, for just the example. So that's one point, is that it's more than just a space. My second point is that an organisation's relationship with a space, there's a big difference between hiring rooms and feeling somewhere is home. We have a home in Eltham. We don't have a home in Diamond Creek. The Diamond Creek, both the Senior Citizens Centre and the Living and Learning building are both treated as rooms for hire, where you apply through an administrative process to book the room for certain times. And what that means is that effectively we're not a stakeholder in either of those buildings. And I think it would be to mutual benefit if we are stakeholders in the venues that we use, and then we can invest in them and we can think about them and we can contribute a lot more. So I wanted to end on talking a bit about Diamond Creek Senior Citizens Centre, which I think is an excellent venue. It suits our purposes very well. There are 3 rooms there. The 3 rooms are all rather different and therefore suit different purposes. However, it could be a much better venue if it was managed in a different way. At the moment, it is treated as rooms for hire, and I think collectively we could make more use of it. Darryl mentioned defibrillators, for example. The reason there's a defibrillator is because we bought it and we installed it, not anyone else.
If you could just wrap up there, Guy. You're pretty much out of time.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Unfortunately, because you're speaking on behalf of U3A, we won't be able to do questions, but thank you for coming in.
That's okay. Cheers.
All right, that's all the speakers we have for the Diamond Creek Community Infrastructure Strategic Plan, so I will look for a motion. Councillor Perkins.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just move the motion as per the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Duffy. Councillor Perkins.
Thank you. So the motion basically is to thank and accept all the submissions, particularly those that came along tonight, Darryl and Guy, and I'd like to pass on my best wishes to Ken Rampling, certainly someone that's done a power of work in the Shire, and you know, my first introduction to Ken was in the first weeks when I joined council, and he met me down in Diamond Creek and invited me to a function there where the Shores were presenting. That would have been 2012, and Ken's worked very, very hard to support Omni and the Diamond Creek community the whole time that I've known him. And same with you, Darryl and Guy. I really appreciate your efforts here tonight. Some of the things I've heard in the submissions that have been borne out is that, you know, it looks like a bit of a 50-50 bet as to whether or not the youth hub should go in the community centre or it should go in the senior sits. There's pros and cons on both sides. I'm tending to head towards the community centre for a youth hub, and perhaps the senior sits can be rebranded and expanded, perhaps to support a wider network of senior people in Diamond Creek. And I suppose for many years I've been led to believe by officers that the senior sits centre was underutilised, and it was only a small senior sits cohort, you know, less than 10 some years ago, and now down to 4 that were using the building. So I was under the impression that it wasn't utilised heavily. I now know, you know, through the submissions that it is, and it's a valued space, and you know, certainly Omni and U3A would like to retain it, and it's appropriate that we support those groups, I think. The other thing we've learnt through the submissions, I believe, is that there's some contention about whether or not it's appropriate to move the maternal health and childcare centre to Coniston Street in Diamond Creek. You know, it's out of centre. It's not near the public transport. You know, there'll be some parking issues. It's in a residential area. There are a wide range of benefits to having the maternal health and childcare, I think, co-located with the community centre. So, you know, I'd like to explore that further. The other thing that's caused some angst amongst community members was the notion of building the aquatic and the gym on top of the skate park. So that would require a relocation of the skate park, but I agree that has to be tackled in the master plan. We can't just not pretend that there's a need for the skate park in Diamond Creek. It just might not be where it currently is. The submissions generally, though, were very supportive of the work done, and I'd like to, you know, thank officers for the work they've done. Andrew's done a great job, and with a lot of support from the whole of council in terms of the staff and councillors. The feedback generally is very, very supportive. You know, people love the idea of having a library in Diamond Creek. They love the idea of the aquatics and the gym being co-located, and most importantly, I think they love the idea of Diamond Creek having a community centre. You know, it's what the current building was built to achieve. It was supposed to be a place for community to meet. Diamond Creek, the second largest township in Nillumbik, essentially doesn't have a hall because what was built as a community centre became a leisure centre. So what Diamond Creek does need is a community hub. You know, a lot of people look with great envy towards Eltham and Hurstbridge. You know, Hurstbridge, a much smaller community that has much greater facilities in terms of that community hub. That's the sort of model we'd like to see in Diamond Creek, and I'm sure the Diamond Creek community support that broadly, and the submissions have shown that. So it's been a good process. I'd like to thank officers for all the work they've done. There's more work to be done, and I think that's the whole point of the submissions. It's helped me to focus my mind on what potentially needs to happen. I think we need to do a little bit more work around the pros and cons of maternal health and childcare in Constant Street, particularly where we've got community members who are making a lot of sense, saying it's not the right spot for it. We've also got nurses who work for council who are suggesting it's not an appropriate spot. In the submissions, you could read yourselves, stories of mothers who have had seizures and can't walk that distance, and it's in a good location at the moment. What it potentially means is that the community centre might be a larger building than what's proposed on this plan. It probably can't go out, it might have to go up, and I can't help but think there might be a need in the future to decentralise some of the council staff and council offices away from this place and perhaps into Diamond Creek, the centre of the Shire. I'm out of time, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Good timing. Councillor Duffy?
Thank you. I'd like to say thank you very much to Guy and also to Daryl for coming and talking to us tonight. Further from what Councillor Perkins has said, one of the things that's most important with what we've heard from the community submissions and the various channels that officers have gone to talk to people about this, and particularly hearing from yourself today, is the attachment to place and the importance of having a home, and that buildings are more than just their function. Buildings have soul, and that soul is created by people and the activities that happen there. So the Diamond Creek Community Hub is certainly something that we want to have as a place that people love going to and feel like they belong. So your feedback is very important, and what's come out loud and clear in what you have had to say today for the organisations that you represent, Older Men, New Ideas and the University of the Third Age, is that you like being in the Senior Citizen Centre and it functions well for you for various reasons that you've mentioned. So that's good for us to hear, because also in our feedback with the youth, 57% of people that responded said they think the youth hub should be in an integrated community building rather than stand alone. So it sounds like that there's some a good rationale for keeping you where you are at the Senior Citizen Centre and not disturbing that apple cart, and looking at the youth going into the community youth centre. So this is all about hearing and listening to try and tweak things to get them right. But I'd like to just thank the people in the community that have made an effort to give us their feedback. We've had 46 written submissions, and there's been a lot of work by our strategic planning team to connect with the community to really hear the views. This is a big project, an ambitious project, requires a lot of money to happen, but it will need to be phased, and we want to get it right so that we aren't actually limiting and upsetting people. We're actually going to be building on making a great community assets and community places for people. And I particularly echo what you've said, Councillor Perkins, in listening to the people who've been able to give us feedback, especially the nurses that have talked to us in their feedback saying, for the reasons that they believe, we need to keep the maternal health centre located in a community hub. I think that that's important with their experience and what they bring day to day to our Shire. So I would just like to commend this project and the efforts that have taken place so far, and on to the next stages. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Any other councillors? Councillor Eyre.
Thank you. Firstly, I just want to say thank you to Daryl from Omni and Guy from U3A. Thank you for coming in tonight and speaking to us about your group's needs, and also to all those who have provided feedback. I won't speak for long. I also just wanted to reiterate what Councillor Perkins and Councillor Duffy have said. I note that a room is not just a space, it's a place to meet, it's a place to grow friendships, it's a place to learn. So all of those things are important, and that is important to remember as part of this project. So really, it's not a quick build, but it's exciting to get started on this project. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Any other councillors? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. The next item is local laws, and we've got 5 speakers on this item. The first speaker is Belinda Moody. So Belinda, if you'd just like to come to the microphone. Microphone's already switched on, so whenever you're ready, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to say that good intentions can bring unwanted consequences, and I think that might be happening with the tree protection controls that are proposed under Part 7. I'd like to question whether or not a tree with a circumference of 0.5 metre is substantial. That's a diameter of 16 centimetres. It's not a lot. Burundara has a local law that sets canopy trees as having a circumference of 1 metre 10 centimetres, and Darebin has a local law that sets it at 1 metre. Both of these municipalities have arborists to administer their tree protection controls. They have multiple arborists. Without a team of arborists, this local law will substantially impact the community safety staff, who will need to explain these new tree protection controls to confused residents, probably over and over again. And they'll have to explain how they interact with the intent of the planning scheme to facilitate removal of trees to minimise bushfire risk. It seems that the local law will still require a permit to remove a tree, even when the planning scheme exempts it in bushfire prone areas. And I'm not sure how the community would feel about that. Without a team of arborists, current community safety staff will need extensive training to interpret the arborist reports, which will begin to flood in, I would expect, hundreds a year. Without a team of arborists, the current community safety staff will be asked to determine if a tree is structurally unstable or in a state of decline. I would ask whether they can do that. This is not common usage words. These are technical arboricultural words. The proposed tree protections will place a substantial financial burden on residents to obtain an arborist report for low value and weedy species. They're $600 to $800 for each arborist report. I wonder how residents will feel about that, and I wonder whether if they might not just choose to leave those weedy species there. This may lead to an increased retention of weedy species on private land, and that will impact the biodiversity values of our green wedge. That's what I mean by unintended consequences. Improved urban forest values can be achieved by supporting the staff at Edendale, both in education and in the nursery. They are doing great work, and supporting the Gardens for Wildlife program, which we are already doing really well. These measures will cost far less than a team of arborists and will be popular amongst the community because they involve empowering the community to make good decisions about the trees on their land, as they have been doing. I'd urge Council to not include the tree protection controls as listed in the draft, and perhaps consider that for future work. Thank you.
Thank you, Belinda. And because you're speaking on your own behalf, we will be able to ask questions. So are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Duffy?
Thank you, Belinda. You mentioned improving the urban forest, and you talked about Edendale Farm and education and looking at the Gardens for Wildlife program. Are you able to tell me what sort of things you're thinking that Edendale Farm could do to help with mitigating what your position?
Yeah, I think Edendale will need support regardless, because the draft local law as it stands suggests, I think, 5 species that can be used as replacements at a ratio of 1 to 3 for tree removals. Edendale would be supplying those. Often I have gone there to buy plants, and there's 1 or 2 staff members on, and a lot of people wanting to ask questions. What is the best tree for my property? What's going to give me habitat value? How do I look after it? Is this a weed? Is that a weed? That the education role that Edendale is currently putting out there will help to improve urban forest by helping people to understand these management factors, rather than, I think, a very prescriptive and narrow tree protection control. Does that answer the question? And as you know, Gardens for Wildlife, which I volunteer for, provides site visits and can involve weed identification. Those site visits, though, would not stop a resident from needing an arborist report. Say, for example, if they had a sweet pittosporum or a pine tree and they live next to a bushland reserve, we could have a Gardens for Wildlife visit and say, oh, that's really a threat to our biodiversity. You might want to think about taking that out. It's expensive to remove trees. It's expensive, again, to then have to get an arborist report and a permit to seek permission to remove the tree. And I just don't know that that's the intention of where council might want to go with tree protection controls.
Thanks, Belinda. Any other questions from councillors? Thank you, Belinda. Our next speaker is Stuart Walpole. Thanks, Stuart. The microphone's already on, so whenever you're ready, you've got 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you everyone for this opportunity tonight to support my views on the proposed changes to the restrictions on animals in the Bend of Islands. So I do not support these changes, and there's sort of 4 key real reasons why I don't support them. In December, me and my partner, we bought our dream house, moved to the area, and we bought that house in the Bend of Islands, consulting with Nillumbik Council, finding out that there was a pre-existing land use right. We went to make an offer, and that was something that was advertised when we purchased this property. We went ahead, we bought the house. It's fantastic. It's an amazing place to live. But with this proposed change, we really have quite large concerns that it will depreciate the value of our property. Being something that was advertised at the time and something that is quite unique to the area, we believe we paid significant amounts of money. It's never measurable, but yeah, we believe it was something that was definitely a factor in the purchasing process. Obviously, there's personal reasons. Having only just moved into the house in March and having this change put forward, we believe, moving forward in our lives, that potentially having a dog, potentially starting a family, they're really important things that go hand in hand. Living in sort of an isolating area, children growing up with a dog, it's an amazing opportunity. To have that taken away so soon is probably a really big concern of us moving forward, and that's sort of one of the reasons we're sort of opposing this law change. From what we understand, we know we're quite new to the area. There's approximately a dozen of these pre-existing use rights. It's been something that have been hard to lock in an exact number. I know there's been a big community consultation, and a lot of those people are here tonight, and they're all fantastic people. But consulting with a couple of neighbours who have these use rights, they know that they haven't, and we haven't been directly consulted. And we sort of feel that it's a majority voting against a minority with us, with these people with these use rights being very much in the minority. And that's, one of the 4 reasons we're sort of opposing this. Moving forward, we understand the environmental importance of the area. We believe that having a dog can be done responsibly. There's a few people within the area, a few neighbours that we've consulted with that still have animals and have dogs, and they've got small dogs that are happy to be inside.
Thanks, Stuart. If you could just wrap up there.
Yep. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Questions?
Any questions from councillors? Councillor Stockman?
Yes, I've got a question for you, Stuart. Before that, I just was thinking of moving or seconding this motion, but I don't think I'll be doing that now, and certainly I do want to hear what your answer is to my question, and that is, you said there's a minority and a majority out there. Do you feel like you've been bullied at all?
No. Everyone's fantastic people. I've never experienced any bullying as such, no.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Egan?
Yes, and I'm through the chair. I'm not sure whether this is allowed because you only gave us one of your 4 points. Can you just, very, very quickly, tell me your other 3?
Yeah, so we're going to dwell on.
If you just list them quickly,
Yep.
but you can't use questions to give them more time.
Majority versus minority, personal situation, concern of the loss of value.
Sorry, what was the first one?
Majority versus minority,
Yeah, well, so I got that one.
our personal situation. Then we were looking at like how recently we bought the house and the loss of value, essentially.
Thanks, Stuart. Any other questions? Councillor Perkins.
So, Stuart, do you currently have a dog or a pet that would be affected by this rule change?
No, we don't. I don't believe responsible pet ownership would be, moving in straight away and then getting a pet because this change in law is going to happen. So no, not at the moment.
So you've had a pet in the past?
Yeah, I've had pets growing up. Yep, and in the past. Yep.
And probably fair to say you had no idea that this was a live proposal when you purchased the property?
Not to this extent, no.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Duffy.
Thank you very much for your presentation tonight, and welcome to Nillumbik. It's great to see young families moving out to Nillumbik, especially the Bend of Islands. It's a wonderful place to live. I hear your wish to be able to have a dog.
Yep.
Are there other animals that you would like to see you have the provision to have if this local law was to not go through? So, bad phrasing of question. I'm supposing you've indicated that you'd like a dog. Is that all you'd like? Or are you saying that you'd like to have other pets as well, and wondering what you think would be appropriate in terms of pets with in this special use zone?
I think we're sort of happy, and the neighbours that we've spoken to even comply to like a stricter set of rules than are currently available. We would, so just thinking that we would have like a totally enclosed area next to the house, dogs not being walked off lead, that sort of thing is where we'd be looking. Other animals wise, it's not anything that I've ever thought about, and it's not anything that I've ever wanted really. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Stuart. So I'm hearing that you just like to have one dog.
One dog. Yeah. One small.
Yeah. Thank you.
Happy dog. Yep.
Through the chair.
Councillor Regan.
A question to staff. Rosa? Behind you, sorry. The existing use right currently only applies to a dog, though, doesn't it? For your particular property. I thought it was only dogs we're talking about.
Chickens and things like that.
Through the chair, it applies to all domestic pets and livestock.
But is it on what was there before, or can you still have a raft of animals if you've got that existing use right? Can you pick and choose your animal, is what I'm saying?
So the existing use right comes with the fact that the dwelling exists in the land. So if you had a dwelling and you had an animal there.
Of one sort, you can't swap that out for a chicken.
Councillor Regan, if you could direct your question through the chair. So I think the question is, if you had one type of animal, is that use right interchangeable to a different type of animal?
Yeah, through the chair, no, it's not.
That's what I want to clarify.
Thanks, Rosa. Councillor Eyre?
Thank you. My question is, when did you contact council, and when, I've actually got two questions, and then when did you put your offer in? Because you said that you moved in March, so what was is it 3 months?
Yeah, it was quite a long settlement. I think it was almost 100 days. So offer would have been made late December, middle of December. Before that offer was made on a couple of days prior, when we got quite serious, I contacted, I've got the emails, Tim Vickers, I think it is, at Nillumbik. I can't remember his job title. I can pull emails up if you want. Yeah, just triple checking everything, and from his end he ticked off everything. It's been all okay. And that was probably the determining factor. It was like, if it doesn't exist, we're a maybe. If it does exist, we're 100% yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. As long as there are no other questions. Thank you for coming in. The next speaker is Alan Bonney. So Alan, the microphone's already on.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'd also like to talk to Clause 67 in support of the Bend of Islands local law. Response from the community was pretty overwhelming, with a lot of submissions that I'm sure you've seen are there. I'm a long-term 30-year resident of Bend of Islands. I support the SUZ2 zoning that's in place and the proposed law to support the zone provisions. The provisions, as I said, have been in place for about 40-odd years, and almost all residents of the zone purchased with the animal exclusion provisions in place. The zoning was why we purchased in the area some 30 years ago. It was a lifestyle choice, and it's a choice that most residents that buy into Bend of Islands make. They buy because of the zoning. This process, that I understand, is not about changing the zone provisions. It's about introducing management tools for our council officers. I also just note that the area of the SUZ2 and Bend of Islands are slightly different, and this consideration should be about the area defined by the zone. I refer to the council as to the Bend of Islands conservation submission on this. It's fairly comprehensive. And I ask that councillors support the Bend of Islands community and that the council officers who manage the planning schemes. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Any questions from councillors? Great, thanks, Alan. The next speaker is Robin Duff.
My neighbour has expressed all the issues that I wanted to cover, so I'll keep the meeting short and not speak. Thank you. Can I just through the chair, which neighbour?
Robin, if you could specify which neighbour? Alan Bonney, who's just spoken. Thank you, Robin. And lastly, we've got Frank Pearce on behalf of Bend of Islands Conservation Association.
Thank you. The Bend of Islands Conservation Association has made a comprehensive submission on this issue, and I don't think I need to go into that. I'd like to make a general comment about the Bend of Islands. In lots of submissions for environmental areas, words like high biodiversity and environmental integrity are often overused to the extent that your eyes can glaze over. I'd like to give a practical example of why the Bend of Islands is special. Last Saturday night, the first call of the white-throated nightjar was heard for its summer season. This rare bird has just returned from New Guinea to spend the summer breeding in the Bend of Islands. We've been recording the movements of these birds for over 15 years and have monitored 3 breeding events where we've seen chicks being raised in the last decade. These are the closest breeding records to Melbourne. In fact, I don't know of any other recent records in the last decade. The bird's success in our area can be attributed to 3 aspects of our local environment. Number 1 is suitable habitat for ground breeding. Number 2 is the absence of dogs and cat predators. And number 3 is the abundance of insects to provide an adequate food resource, which is a function of the biodiversity of the area. These attributes don't exist anywhere else in the peri-urban zone around Melbourne and only exist in the Bend of Islands due to the provisions of the SUZ2 and the strong support of these by the community and the council. This is just one example of many that I could give of why this area is special. It supports lyrebirds and many other iconic species that are nowhere else in the peri-urban zone. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Egan?
Yes, thank you for your submission, Frank. So currently we've got 12 properties that have the existing use rights, and I presume there's roughly 10 dogs or thereabouts. So if you're recording that sort of information with the 10 dogs, what's the issue about them continuing? Because you've already just said this is what's happening because we don't have dogs. You don't. This isn't about increasing the number of dogs, just to choose dogs as an example. So why not let these people have their dogs that currently do, is my question.
Dogs do affect the wildlife of the area and decrease the quality of the biodiversity of the area. There's scientific papers which I've referred to in the bigger submission, which prove that even dogs being walked on a lead affect the wildlife in an area.
Yes.
If you take sugar gliders, for instance, their whole interaction between each other in family groups is all based on scent. A dog walks through the area, they pick up the scent of the dog, which they immediately recognise as a predator, and it disrupts their lifestyle.
Thanks, Frank. The CEO has just reminded me that you're speaking on behalf of Bend of Islands Conservation Association, so I shouldn't have asked allowed questions. I do apologise for that.
Okay.
That's all the speakers we have on the local laws tonight. So I'll thank all the speakers, and I will look for a motion. Councillor Duffy.
I'm happy to move the officer's motion, and the motion reads that the committee, that's us, considers the community engagement conducted on and the feedback provided to the exhibition of the draft Nillumbik General Local Law in Attachment 1 and the associated documentation in Attachments 2 and 3. And this also, I'd just like to talk about it including exhibition engagement outlined and community response and feedback included in this report that's come today. The summary of the exhibition feedback, which is in Attachment 3, the exhibition survey responses, which are provided confidential and unredacted in Attachment 3 and redacted in Attachment 4, and the exhibition submissions provided confidential and unredacted Attachment 5 and redacted Attachment 7. I think there's also a little bit just on the next page. Point 2, that we consider the feedback contained in the submissions and this report during further reviews and finalisation of the Nillumbik General Local Law and associated documentation. The committee resolves the confidential unredacted copy of the written submissions to the draft Nillumbik General Local Law, Attachments 6 and 7, remains confidential on the grounds specified in the definition of confidential information in the said parts of the Local Government Act 2020. And lastly, that council writes to all residents, to all respondents to the exhibition of the draft local laws to express council's appreciation for their contribution and to advise them of the committee's resolution and the next steps in this project.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Stockman. Councillor Duffy.
Like the motion is long, the local laws review has been long and lengthy. Council's review of the local laws has been thorough and actively sought to be guided by the community, and hearing from members of the community tonight reinforces that. Council officers have reached out to the community in many ways to include as many residents' opinions as possible. The review has included 3 rounds of consultation and has been it's been almost 2 years in the making to get to this point. It was one of the things as a new council that was impressed on us when we first took office in November. In the December, we were given the local laws as a starting point to read everything, and these were, this has been an ongoing body of work. So council officers have taken this very seriously, and I'd like to thank Alicia for her work, Heath for his work, and Rosa and the team that have been responsible for getting us this far, and particularly the emphasis on ensuring that the community has multiple opportunities to voice their feedback so this can be tweaked as required, because the laws are black and white. Unfortunately, as much as we'd like to have areas of grey, the laws don't allow for grey. So we want to make sure that they're right. Just to touch on a couple of provisions that are proposed in the law, in the changes, some that weren't mentioned tonight, some have been. So drones, for example, there was a provision for operating drones on council land. This is no longer necessary as the Civil Aviation Safety Authority has regulations in place for this. So feedback has come from many different sources. Another area is the consumption of liquor in public places. Our review of the law is hoping to identify and prescribe places where liquor consumption can or can't be consumed. Specific activities. Our local law permits fireworks. It doesn't permit fireworks outside the urban growth boundary, but in 2019, before this council was formed, created a law which was introduced So that law doesn't actually need to be a standalone law anymore. That can come into the general local laws. So we're trying to make sure that the laws are not, that they're succinct, because it's a huge document. Looking at a couple of other areas that are under review for the laws, animals, so noisy animals, predominantly roosters, look to see a permit being required for all properties that have a space greater than 4,000 square metres. At the moment, you can have roosters if you've got an area of land that's greater than that without a permit. So that's looking to make sure that there's a permit that's required. Some of these things are actually good. It's good to hear both sides of the stories, and particularly when we come to the Bend of Islands. So land under the planning scheme, there are elements that can't be enforced. So by bringing into the local laws, it allows council officers to follow up things appropriately to enforce the special use zone laws. So for example, we've been hearing about the Bend of Islands today, and it is a special place. So these proposed changes, if they do come into the local laws, will enable council officers to enforce those. And the majority of feedback from residents, from what we've received, is supportive of a total prohibition of pets and livestock in the Bend of Islands. There's lots of areas that we can go to for the whys, and we've got a climate action plan and a biodiversity strategy that we're looking to look towards as well. I just would like to acknowledge Stuart speaking tonight as a new member of our community coming to live in the Bend of Islands, and his plea to be able to have a dog for his family moving forward. And I also note that he did suggest that if I was allowed to have a dog, we would be open to having it in an enclosed area, so almost like a contained area. I can't promise what's going to happen with this, whether that will be allowed or not allowed, but you've given us things to think about with the local government, the local laws, if that's to go through, or if it's not to go through, what changes we might be able to consider as councillors to make that amenable to you. But also at the same time, listening very carefully to what Alan Bonney and Frank Pearce have said as other residents that live in the Bend of Islands as to why they've purchased there many years ago, and their reasons for wanting to see this prohibition of domestic and livestock animals on their properties. So local laws, essentially, it's tricky, and it comes right down to things like planting on nature strips, who does what, where and when. So we'd like to make sure we get it right. I won't keep talking. I'd just like to say thank you again to the community for your involvement, and to council officers for the work that they've done, and there's still a little bit for us to consider.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Great timing. Councillor Stockman.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that local laws are there to create harmonious communities, and I'd like to congratulate Heath and his team for putting this together. It was good to listen to both Belinda and Stuart, and I obviously do see both their points of view, but look, it's unfortunately we need to have these in place, and I do hope, I do thank you for coming out, and hope you can come out again and speak to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stockman. Councillor Perkins?
Yeah, I'd certainly like to thank the submitters, and some of what has been said tonight correlates with my gut feeling when this process started. A couple of issues. I suppose the first is the notion of existing use rights. I believe that all the people that currently don't have existing use rights didn't have existing use rights when they purchased their properties. So they purchased their properties knowing how it was zoned and the restrictions that came along with that zoning. So they weren't to have domestic animals. There are other people who owned properties prior to that subdivision who have always been able to have domestic animals, and that's still the case. So I do struggle. I sympathise greatly with Stuart. I like most of us have a domestic animal, and I know for my own health and well-being, I don't know where I'd be without my pet. And I do sympathise with Stuart in terms of him looking to the future and his family and the needs of them. If it comes down to a contest of votes, of course the people who don't have existing use rights see no need to not have them because they've never had them, sort of thing. So there's a whole heap of existing use rights across the Shire. There's lands that are being used for purposes that would not be available to them today. But the fact is, time and time again, you inquire about a property, why is this going on there? Oh, they've got existing use rights. And I've never seen an attempt by council to extinguish existing use rights in the past, and I think it's fraught with danger, to be honest. I'm going to have trouble supporting that part of it. I think the other thing is around the tree protection. I think that's potentially got some hairs on it too. If that flies in the face of exemptions that are intended to make Nillumbik a safer place in case of bushfire, I think that might be a dangerous path to go down, and I have trouble supporting that side of it. Just quickly on the drones, so I introduced the concept around the drones. It wasn't to try to replicate what the Civil Aviation Safety Authority does. It was really what I was trying to, and it hasn't been translated well, but really what I was trying to get to is, can council prohibit the use of drones in any part of its land? You know, so if the council has an environmental reserve in, you know, Chase Environmental Reserve in North Warrandyte or wherever it is, could council say, you know, exactly because of the concerns raised by the Bend of Islands Conservation Group, could we say that no, we don't want drones flying above that environmental or conservation reserve because of the you know, the impact on animals, native animals especially. So that's where that was coming along, and I'd like that question to be answered at some point. Thank you,
Councillor Perkins. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. I acknowledge also what's been said before me by Councillor Duffy and Councillor Perkins, that tonight marks the conclusion of the third phase of consultation in relation to the development of Council's new local laws, and follows two earlier phases of consultation undertaken in the last 12 months. So it's been a very lengthy process, and it's to ensure that we have heard all the views of our community, or as many of our community as we can. This round, being the third, has been to gather feedback on the redrafted provisions within the draft Nillumbik General Local Law 1 regarding their appropriateness and whether they are fit for purpose for the Nillumbik community in 2022 and beyond. And we've heard some guest speakers tonight who have spoken on different topics, and they will be considered. So we've received over 140 submissions and a range of considerations, including tonight, on issues that were identified in the feedback, including drones, trees, the Bend of Isles and pets and animals. So thank you for taking the time to come tonight and to talk, and to all those who have given feedback. And to note that this feedback from tonight's submissions, together with the submissions we've received over the consultation period, will be looked at and reviewed, and any necessary amendments before the final version is made will be added or altered before it's presented to Council for consideration and adoption. So thank you to all involved, officers, community, and also councillors, in getting our local laws to this point.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Councillor Egan.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to thank Heath and his staff. I know it was a new role for him, and he had to get his head around it, and a very big job it's been too. And I'd also like to thank all the submitters. Most unusually, I concur with Councillor Perkins tonight. In fact, in everything he said. If we remove this existing use right, and when we first went down this route, there were a whole lot of issues which I knew were going to cause problems, you know, like the proposal to make it illegal to have barbed wire and the glyphosate stuff. I put the existing use rights in that same bucket. I'd actually like, if it came to a crunch, I'd like to see it in the courts, because I don't think it would stand up with our existing planning scheme. So I'll be voting for this tonight because it's not a decision, but if it stays in this current vein, I don't know how we're actually going to do it, because there's some stuff I would vote for and some I wouldn't, but the way things have been going, I wouldn't be voting for that particular law tonight. I'd also like to see a decision on the drone and have that a little bit tidier as well, being a photographer myself. So that's all I have to say on that.
Thank you, Councillor Egan. I believe that all councillors have gone. I'll take my 3 minutes as well, and I believe I'm meant to stand up in order to do so. Look, I'd just like to thank all the speakers who've come along tonight to address council. Just to touch on the local law in relation to trees, and I think some really interesting issues have been raised there. So thank you to Belinda for coming in and raising them. I think that the provision itself is incredibly important, especially in our urban areas. We're seeing a lot of trees being cut down or poisoned or otherwise killed by some landowners in urban areas of Nillumbik, while the other people who moved in there because they love that tree canopy are having their hearts broken to see that go. So that tree canopy in the urban areas is particularly important, and we need to look at ways of protecting that and protecting our urban tree canopy. It is crucial that we do that, and that's what that particular local law is about. But I can see some of those unintended consequences that have been raised, so perhaps we need to have some consideration as to how we can not remove but change that law in order to reduce some of those impacts, such as making exemptions to the law for woody weeds and pine trees. I think that's a very important point, because we don't necessarily want pine trees in Nillumbik, or at least we don't want to be protecting them. In terms of Bend of Islands, thank you to all the speakers who've come in. I think one thing that's really important to clarify about this local law is it could do one of two things, and we can certainly change wording here and there. There are 12 or so properties. It's difficult to get an exact number. The number 12 has been thrown around tonight. 12 or so properties that have always been understood to have some form of use right for some sort of animal. However, what this local law is really about, the key driver behind it right from the start, has been to make sure that the provisions in the planning scheme that have been there since way back in the 1970s, when the environmental living zone was first set up, those provisions have always prevented pets from most houses in Bend of Islands. And this local law is about clarifying them and backing them up through our local laws to make it easier for officers to actually enforce them and argue a legal point. Currently, there are challenges arguing the legal point with the planning mechanisms that we have. The local law would back that up. In terms of the 12 or so properties that have always been understood to have existing use rights, there is the option to have those rights expire over time or to retain those rights in the form that they've always been. But the local law can go through in under either option, and it would tidy up and reinforce the provisions that have already existed. Dogs outdoors in the Bend of Islands leave a smell which can be picked up on by animals. So even if they're in an enclosure, they still disturb wildlife through the smell and the odour that they leave behind, and that's a key consideration here. And I am out of time. Chair can't chair themselves. All right, thank you everybody. It really shows how passionate councillors are when all of us speak to an item, so that's good to see. I'll put that one to the vote. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. There's no supplementary or urgent business, no confidential reports, and so I'll close the meeting at 7:59 p.m. Thanks everybody.